When World War II ended, the world focused on the trials of Germany and its Nazi forces for their horrific war crimes. However, in the frenzy of retribution against the Nazis, the world seemed to forget the equally appalling atrocities committed by the Light of Asia, Japan. The Imperial Japanese forces, under the aegis of Hirohito, perpetrated war crimes that rivaled the cruelty of the Nazis, sadistic experiments and massacres that claimed the lives of thousands of innocent people, including men, women, and children. Unit 731, the Imperial Japanese Army's Biological and Chemical Warfare Research Unit, became a symbol of this cruelty. They exploited advancements in science and medicine to develop deadly biological weapons, using prisoners of war as their test subjects. Horrific experiments, such as live dissections, virus trials, and bacterial injections were conducted mercilessly and without humanity. Tragically, despite the world's awareness of these atrocities, justice was never served. Unit 731 and its members remained free from legal repercussions, living peacefully without punishment for their crimes. During the war, Japan emerged as a dominant power in Asia, with Emperor Hirohito disregarding the rules of war to maintain his power. To achieve this ambition, Hirohito authorized the use of biological and chemical weapons, making them instruments of brutal conquest. Unit 731, funded by the Japanese Empire, was stationed in northeastern China, a fertile ground for their horrific experiments. They established research fortresses that also served as prisons for prisoners of war, becoming terrifying places for the victims trapped in sadistic trials. Most of these prisoners were civilians, including children, who were confined and treated like experimental animals. Unit 731, a secret Japanese military organization during World War II, is infamous for its horrific cruelty and medical experiments. Although many believe that the victims of this unit were solely Chinese, they were actually diverse, including nationals from allied countries opposed to Japan, such as the Soviet Union, Korea, Mongolia, and even the United States. The experiments conducted by Unit 731 were not only to test the biological weapons they developed, but also to understand the limits of the human body under extreme conditions. They aimed to determine how resilient Japanese soldiers could be on the battlefield. These experiments were highly secretive, and little information about the atrocities committed by Unit 731 was revealed. Testimonies from former workers provide a horrifying glimpse of what happened behind the unit's walls. One particularly gruesome example is the cold weather experiment, where human subjects were deliberately exposed to extreme temperatures until they froze. Victims were forced outside without adequate clothing, doused with cold water, and left to freeze. Guards would then strike the frozen body parts with wooden sticks to ensure the victims were completely frozen. If a sound akin to a wooden clack was heard, it indicated the victim had died from frostbite. The bodies were then taken inside and tended to by doctors. Tragically, these experiments were often conducted with a blatant disregard for human life. Victims were left to thaw on their own, and even when doctors attempted to save them, it was often too late. Despite the atrocities committed by Unit 731, these experiments provided the Japanese military with valuable information about human endurance. However, this invaluable information came at an exorbitantly high cost: the lives of innocent human beings. Unit 731, a secret Japanese military unit, conducted horrifying experiments during World War II, which included not only frostbite testing but also brutal vivisections on live humans. Believing that hot water could combat frostbite, the scientists of Unit 731 doused their subjects with water at temperatures above 100 degrees Fahrenheit, but not exceeding 122 degrees Fahrenheit. However, their cruelty did not stop there. The doctors of Unit 731 performed surgeries without anesthesia on live prisoners, opening their bodies to observe the effects of deliberately induced diseases and infected organs. These prisoners were treated like guinea pigs, devoid of humanity and with no regard for their suffering. One medical assistant who worked at Unit 731 described his first experience of vivisecting a live man in an interview with the New York Times. He recounted the horrifying screams and the indescribable expressions of pain on the man's face as he was dissected from chest to abdomen. This account serves as concrete evidence of the atrocities committed by Unit 731, where live prisoners were forced to endure unimaginable suffering to satisfy the curiosity and ambitions of the surgeons. Furthermore, Unit 731 also conducted experiments with dangerous pathogens such as cholera and anthrax, both within their camp and in nearby villages. The aim was to test the effectiveness of their biological weapons and to observe how disease outbreaks spread. Some of these experiments were successful, fueling Japan's ambition to bring their pathogens to the United States via balloon bombs. The unimaginable cruelty inflicted by Unit 731 on living humans stands as a dark testament to the war crimes and inhumanity perpetrated by the Japanese military regime during World War II. Japan's brutality during World War II extended beyond its large-scale attacks to a series of horrific experiments conducted by Unit 731. Records show that Japan sent around 200 balloons towards the United States, most failing to reach their targets, but some resulting in the deaths of 7 people. Even more gruesome plans included spreading anthrax-infected fleas using kamikaze pilots in San Diego, though this plan never came to fruition. Japanese scientists tested weapons by firing or throwing grenades at prisoners tied to stakes in the middle of fields, simply to observe the impact. These tests also involved flamethrowers and chemical weapons. In one incident, toxic gas fired at prisoners was carried by strong winds towards Japanese guards, forcing them to flee. Unit 731 also conducted pressure chamber experiments, where prisoners were forced into pressure machines and squeezed until their eyes popped out and their bodies ruptured, causing excruciating deaths. Additionally, they used centrifuges on humans to test their bodies' centrifugal force tolerance and resilience. Sadistically, doctors and scientists at the camp deliberately spread sexually transmitted diseases, not only through injections but also by forcing prisoners to have sexual intercourse, including children born in the camp. These atrocities highlight the horrific nature of Unit 731's experiments conducted in the name of science and the cruelty of war. Unit 731, a covert Japanese military facility operating during World War II, stands as a dark stain on human history. Within the cold walls of this facility, scientists and doctors conducted horrific experiments on human prisoners, often with sadistic intent, forcing pregnancy on female prisoners and then exposing their children to deadly diseases. The purpose? To study the development of diseases and their effects on human organs at different stages of life. The unfortunate babies born from these experiments, many at the facility itself, did not survive. Uncovered testimonies reveal the existence of many more gruesome experiments, such as injecting animal blood in seawater, exposing humans to dangerous levels of radiation, and even burning them alive. Historians believe that Unit 731's role was far more complex than previously thought, with the Japanese military being just one actor in this war crime. In his thesis, Imperial Japan's Human Experiments Before and During World War II, Alan J. Vander Broek, a researcher at the University of Central Florida, argues that Unit 731 operated within a much broader and more complex context than many people realize. He states that almost all of Japan's major universities, as well as many scientific and medical professionals, military and civilian hospitals, military laboratories, and even the entire Japanese military, were involved in these horrific experiments. Unit 731 not only conducted sadistic experiments, but also played a crucial role in developing weapons of mass destruction. The cruelty of Unit 731 serves as a stark reminder of how science can be misused for inhumane purposes and how collaboration between the military, academia, and medical institutions can produce unimaginable atrocities. Shiro Ishii's involvement in advancing medical knowledge and science is a testament to his unwavering pursuit of revolutionary ideas, even if they were sometimes considered extreme. Born in Shiba on June 25, 1892, Shiro Ishii was the fourth child of a minor aristocratic family. His father, Katsuya Ishii, was a descendant of nobles who had ruled over the small village and surrounding lands for centuries. Katsuya himself was known as the wealthiest landowner and owner of a sake brewery, ensuring a stable income for the Ishii family. They received tribute from local farmers who used their land and profited from sake sales. Unfortunately, information about Shiro Ishii's mother is very limited. Not even her full name is known. There are also conflicting accounts of his birthplace, with some historians claiming that Shiro Ishii was actually born in Shibayama, Chiba Prefecture. Regardless, historians agree that Shiro Ishii was born into a privileged environment as the son of a minor aristocrat. He grew up in a rigid class system that had not changed much for centuries, separating him far from the lives of the lower classes. This may have contributed to his view that there were lower classes of humans, as he was accustomed from an early age to receiving special treatment and respect from the villagers in return for the protection provided by his family. His parents provided him with all the amenities, surrounded him with servants who assisted him in various matters, and gave him more opportunities for a decent education. Shiro Ishii's education and upbringing instilled in him a deep appreciation for the Japanese language and a strong sense of patriotism. He witnessed his country's rapid progress following the Meiji Restoration, a 19th century political and industrial revolution in Japan sparked by the young Emperor Meiji. Emperor Meiji reclaimed power from the shogunate or regional military rulers, who had previously held the imperial family hostage and forced the emperor and his family act as figureheads. Under the leadership of the young Emperor Meiji, Japan stunned the world when, in the early 1900s, its army and navy defeated the much larger and more prestigious Russian military in the Russo-Japanese War. This land of the rising sun was no longer bound to the past and emerged as a global power through its heightened nationalism. Ishii grew up during this period, and it inspired him to commit to advancing the empire and preventing Japan's enemies from gaining the upper hand. From an early age, Ishii demonstrated exceptional intelligence, excelling in his studies. His teachers and peers recognized his remarkable ability to absorb and retain information. This academic prowess led him to the prestigious Kyoto Imperial University, where he pursued a degree in medicine. His brilliance continued to shine, earning him the attention and admiration of his professors. His academic achievements granted him access to exclusive research projects reserved for only the most outstanding students. The assignment given to Ishii felt like an attempt to isolate him from his friends. Most of them saw their friendship with Ishii as a superficial relationship, a path to smooth their career and position. Although it seemed cunning, his friends were not entirely wrong. Ishii would do the same. A common secret among them was that Ishii was power-hungry and often used his friendship connections to achieve the fame and success he wanted. However, not all conversations about Ishii centered on his brilliant education and reputation. Young Ishii was known as a wild individual. He often held parties that ended in drunkenness or ended up in brothels in Tokyo, all funded by his family's abundant wealth. His wildness, however, did not become a significant obstacle to his career. Ishii managed to gain the trust of many elites at his university, including the university rector, Torosoro Araki. His success was inseparable from Ishii's astuteness and flattery. Since the beginning of college, Ishii diligently visited the rector, even though many people considered it a breach of etiquette. He got closer to Araki in this way. Ishii then married Araki's daughter, Kyoto, in 1920, shortly after completing his studies. This marriage gave him a daughter, Harumi, whom he loved very much. In addition to his marriage, graduation from university marked the beginning of his career journey. Ishii, unlike his friends who chose to open private medical practices, had a deep desire to serve the country. He chose to join the military, and his skills as a surgeon led him to be assigned to the First Army Hospital in Tokyo in 1922, the rank of first lieutenant. His extraordinary dedication and hard work made him stand out among his peers. However, his desire to continue learning prompted Ishii to leave his military career in 1924 and pursue a doctoral education at Kyoto Imperial University. There he focused on the fields of blood serum, bacteriology, and human pathology, showing an unquenchable spirit of science. He then participated in a research expedition in Ik, a small island in Japan hit by an encephalitis epidemic, a deadly brain inflammation disease with a death rate reaching 60% and killing more than 3,500 people. Through intensive research, Ishii succeeded in finding an effective filter to isolate the virus, an achievement that made him increasingly famous among scientists and medical experts. After completing his doctorate and earning a PhD in microbiology in 1927 from Kyoto Imperial University, Ishii was reassigned to the Army Hospital in Kyoto, this time with the rank of captain. His scientific spirit never faded. He continued to produce research works and projects, including a paper co-written with Dr. Tomosada Masuda, explaining their method in inducing fever in patients to treat gonorrhea. However, one day, Ishii read the 1925 Geneva Convention report that sparked a new idea in his mind: biological warfare. The concern for human rights and welfare that had underpinned him as a doctor now shifted to a much darker concept: the creation of super germs and diseases that could be used as weapons in conflict. Shiro Ishii, an ambitious Japanese scientist, believed that his country should violate international treaties and create biological weapons to conquer its enemies. He argued that countries banning biological weapons showed a deep fear of its power, and this belief was further solidified after discussions with officials and colleagues. Although initially a hypothesis, Ishii eventually fully committed to developing biological weapons, ignoring all obstacles for the victory of the Japanese emperor. Ishii began an active campaign to promote his ideas. Although initially ignored, he continued to advance and built a reputation as a persistent and determined individual. Driven by strong belief, Ishii embarked on a world tour to study biological weapons research in other countries, leaving a minimal trace in historical records. However, the remnants of evidence left behind show that Ishii met with scientists in various countries, both in private and government organizations, to discuss biological weapons. He was not afraid to ask detailed questions and investigate, hoping to return to Japan with new insights that would convince the government of the need for biological weapons. This 2-year journey solidified Ishii's belief that other countries and their scientists were investigating the potential of biological warfare, and that Japan should be at the forefront of this terrifying race. Ishii returned to Japan in 1930, greeted with enthusiasm by the new military leaders who had been in power since 1929. They replaced the previous era of military leadership commanded by Gichi Tanaka, a man who dominated Japanese politics and had previously thwarted Ishii's germ warfare plans. Fortunately for Ishii, these new military leaders were much more willing to go to war to strengthen and expand the empire's territory. Regardless of the methods used in warfare, many Japanese military leaders believed that the next step to secure Japanese power depended on their invasion of Manchuria, a region in northeastern China. This region was strategically vital to assist the Japanese Empire in facilitating attacks to conquer the Soviet Union and weaken the threat of communism in Asia. Ishii saw this new leadership as an opportunity to launch his biological weapons campaign and get permission to start biological warfare research. He argued that other countries were developing biological weapons and Japan would be left behind if it did not produce its own biological weapons, and stated that these weapons were low cost. Of course, this made the military leaders interested in his idea, especially as the world was experiencing the Great Depression in the United States. Ishii understood that the military budget was suffering due to the economic downturn, so the lure of low cost would certainly provide a greater opportunity for his idea to be accepted and approved. In addition to convincing many parties, Ishii also showed the fear that could be caused by biological weapons against Japan's enemies. His efforts eventually received even more acceptance than he expected. War Minister Sada Araki became his main supporter, followed by support from military leaders Tetsuya Nagata and Shikihiko Koizumi. Major General Nagata, Japanese military leader, played a crucial role in planning the invasion of Manchuria in September 1931. Meanwhile, Colonel Koizumi, who had experience in using weapons of mass destruction during World War I, spent years studying and developing chemical weapons such as poisonous gas. His knowledge and strong connections in the Japanese government made Koizumi an important asset for Shiro Ishii, who aspired to build a stronger Japanese military force. Koizumi's promotion to Army Surgeon General in 1934 and Health Minister in 1936 further expanded his influence network, paving the way for Ishii to gain significant support for his research. Through strong support from military and political leaders like Nagata and Koizumi, Ishii finally got approval to conduct research and was even promoted to major and appointed as the head of the immunology department at Tokyo Army Medical College. This position gave him the freedom and resources needed to pursue his ambition in developing biological weapons. With funding from the government, Ishii built a network among academics and the military, dividing his time between teaching and conducting experiments at night. His research involved the development of deadly diseases and toxins, with a special focus on plague, which is famous for the Black Death outbreak in the Middle Ages. Ishii was also interested in cholera, typhus, and anthrax diseases. Initially, this research did not involve humans and focused on creating vaccines to combat biological weapons. The brilliant success of Ishii's research led to a significant increase in his research budget. With these funds, Ishii upgraded his equipment and expanded his research facilities. Ishii's fortune grew even more when the Japanese Chemical Warfare Unit was reformed, which heavily relied on his research. Over time, Ishii aspired to expand his program by initiating a project to manufacture biological weapons. However, Ishii realized that to conduct comprehensive experiments, he needed human subjects. Coincidentally, at the same time, Japan was expanding its territory with invasions into Manchuria and China. These invasions sparked severe condemnation from the League of Nations, which subsequently led to Japan's withdrawal from the organization. Ishii saw this as a golden opportunity for his research project. He sent letters to military commanders with a clear message: "It's time we start experimenting. We request to be sent to Manchuria to develop new weapons." Military and civilian leaders understood the hidden meaning behind the phrase, "It's time we start experimenting." Ishii wanted human test subjects, especially those who were not of Japanese descent. Ishii was confident in his program and was eager to test the research he and his colleagues had conducted on people he considered inferior to him. Manchuria, with its isolated rural areas, offered a golden opportunity for Ishii to establish his biological weapons facility in the city. Harbin, a city located on the Sungara River with a military budget of 200,000 yen, is a multi-ethnic city with a population consisting of Chinese, Russian, Japanese, and other minority ethnic groups. This cultural blend makes Harbin known as the Paris of the East, and it is also a strategic railway hub in the region. In this city, Ishii, a Japanese military scientist, established a secret research facility named Epidemic Prevention Unit. Initially, this facility was placed in an abandoned beer-making building. However, because the building was considered too small, Ishii decided to relocate and build a larger facility in a remote location. This decision was made because Ishii wanted to keep his experiments confidential, and the hustle and bustle of Harbin City would make it difficult. His relocation request was approved, and a few months later, in the summer of 1932, a new, larger facility was built in Bainhai, an area located near the local railway line just 100 kilometers from Harbin. This area was obtained by forcibly seizing and brutally evicting the local population. The new facility was equipped with guards and strict watchtowers to prevent escapes and information leaks. The support Ishii received made him more determined to show the best results in his research. Ishii focused on developing biological weapons as a tool to confront the Soviet Union, which controlled the northern region of Manchuria. He named the code for his biological weapons development Togo, taken from the name of the Japanese naval hero Hidechiro Togo, who defeated the Russian Navy in 1905. Ishii's belief that biological weapons would be an effective tool to defeat the Soviet Union in future wars became stronger. Ishii Shiro, an ambitious Japanese microbiologist, had a terrifying obsession, developing deadly biological weapons. He knew that anthrax bacteria, which can survive in cold temperatures, were an ideal weapon. However, instead of focusing on the threat posed by the Soviet Union's forces, Japan's Central Command decided to attack China first, which was considered weaker and poorly organized. Ishii's desire to conduct his horrifying experiments, which he called secret of secret, was far stronger than the threat of war. For the glory of Japan, and perhaps also for his own ego, Ishii started a secret project in a new facility named Zong Makina Fortress. Behind the fortress walls, Ishii created hell. The local residents realized that the building under construction was not a military fortress or research center, but a terrifying torture place. Rumors about screams heard from inside the fortress spread quickly. The villagers tried to avoid the building at all costs, knowing that hundreds of forced Chinese workers were used to build the facility. Almost none of the workers survived, especially those employed to build the inner complex, where medical experiments would be conducted. They were mercilessly killed to prevent Ishii's secrets from leaking. The Zong Fortress had a prison cell block that could accommodate 500 to 600 people. They were shackled at the ankles and hands, but were fed nutritious food. Ishii wanted to keep his victims healthy to be test subjects for brutal disease transmission experiments. Most of the prisoners were initially men under 40 years old. They began to be tested in the fall of 1932 with various deadly diseases, including glanders, smallpox, dysentery, and especially plague. Most prisoners did not survive more than 30 days. The brutal tests and procedures exceeded human capabilities. All who died were then cremated in the nearest building, an action no less horrifying. Ishii's unfeeling supporters considered the people who were killed as necessary sacrifices to protect the Japanese Empire and advance human knowledge. No one in Japan protested against Ishii's experiments, perhaps because those who disagreed with this choice chose to remain silent. Support behind Ishii also began to increase, as seen from his willingness to invite military leaders to visit the camp. One military commander, Lieutenant General Soburu Endo, recorded his experiences that occurred in 1933 in his daily notes. He wrote that he had witnessed the brutal conditions and horrifying experiments conducted at the facility, proving that brutal practices were indeed happening inside the camp. However, it seemed that Endo was not disturbed, even saying that it was something extraordinary. What was more disturbing was that Endo had actually been part of a delegation at the Geneva Convention that prohibited the development and use of biological weapons, but now he who oversaw Ishii's projects supported it unconditionally. Ishii added to the horror by recording all of his experiments to be documented and witnessed by the leaders in Japan, to provide information to policymakers about what had been learned at the research facility. Hideki Tojo, the future Prime Minister of Japan during World War II, watched many of these recordings, but he was actually very uncomfortable with the brutality he saw. Strangely, there were no protest notes lodged by Tojo for the horrifying project. The experiments continued for another 2 years without any significant obstacles, until finally on a fall night in 1934, there was a mass escape from the prison. A Chinese communist freedom fighter named Li attacked his guard and managed to unlock the prison cell. That night, the Mid-Autumn Festival party in the prison block made the guards drunk, and the heavy rain caused the electricity on the fence to malfunction. This opportunity was used by more than 30 prisoners to escape. However, as they began to climb the wall, 10 people were shot dead by officers, including Lei. Although 20 others managed to jump over the wall, 8 of them were captured and brutally killed. The 12 surviving prisoners joined the anti-Japanese resistance group, playing a crucial role in spreading news about the horrifying experiments conducted at Zoma Camp. This escape indeed confirmed the rumors circulating in the area, but it made Japan increase security and build a new camp named Pingfun. Ishii, who was unstoppable in his efforts to create biological weapons, ordered the destruction of Zoma and the elimination of research traces in 1935. In its place, a new, more evil program was implemented by the Japanese military with the formation of special units, Emperor Hirohito, in 1936. To build the horrifying facility known as Unit 731 in Pingfun, Manchuria, Japan constructed an extensive infrastructure. An airport was built to allow aircraft access to the location, while hundreds of poor Chinese families were forced to evacuate as their homes were demolished to build a grand research complex. Canals were constructed within the complex to facilitate the transportation of prospective victims who would become experimental subjects. Over nearly 3 years, workers built a complex consisting of more than 150 buildings, including laboratories, barracks, research centers, prisons, animal breeding houses, officials' residences, schools for the children of officials and Japanese scientists, restaurants, bars, Shinto temples, swimming pools, libraries, parks, and theaters. The complex transformed into a small, grand city in the middle of Manchuria. During the construction, the horrifying experiments conducted by Shiro Ishii and his team continued. They developed and spread biological weapons on the nearest civilians and prisoners of war in their camps. One cruel testing method was to tie prisoners to poles in the field and shoot biological weapons at their bodies. Other horrifying experiments were conducted to perfect Ishii's biological weapons, all recorded for viewing by the Imperial authorities. Ishii's success enhanced his image among intellectuals and the military, giving him the power he desired. In the early 1940s, the Japanese government increasingly normalized Ishii's experiments by inviting a group of young people, some as young as 13 years old, called the Danshichimu or male troops, to come from Japan to the complex in Manchuria. They witnessed the experiments and sometimes assisted in the brutal procedures. A year later, with the Emperor's approval, Ishii's research center in Pingfen was given the title Unit 731, a title that stuck to the complex for the remainder of the war. This research program expanded rapidly with the joining of researchers from various backgrounds, reaching its peak with 30,000 people, including leading scientists from Ishii University. Ishii University, now regarded as a pioneer in medical research, achieved its status by sacrificing the lives of innocent people. Moral ethics were set aside for what they considered progress. In 1939, Unit 731 from Ishii University played a crucial role in the Nomanin incident, a conflict between Japan and the Soviet Union. The unit spread typhus germs in the river located above the Soviet army camp, successfully hindering Russian and Mongolian defenses. This success brought greater praise and funding for Ishii from Emperor Hirohito, but it was just the beginning of his ruthless ambition. Ishii became increasingly active in spreading various dangerous and deadly viruses to attack Chinese troops and destroy civilians. Thousands, even hundreds of thousands of people died from the epidemics they spread. The methods of spreading varied, from introducing viruses into wells and rivers to bombing cities with poisonous gas. One by one, the regions under Chinese control collapsed due to the widespread epidemic, claiming lives and destroying the economy. Terror and fear gripped Japan's enemies. The coronavirus developed by Ishii proved to be far more deadly than its natural virus. Even more horrifying, Ishii offered a disease antidote vaccine that was actually filled with cholera bacteria with deadly effects. Ishii cruelly referred to his actions as experiments to see how effective his virus worked. In 1942, the Chinese government officially accused the Japanese government of being involved in biological warfare, revealing the horrifying crimes committed by Ishii and his team. Reports issued about Unit 731, a horrific Japanese biological weapons program during World War II, shockingly overlooked dozens of attacks carried out by the Japanese team. Japanese officials, who were well aware of the horrific actions of Shiro Ishii, the leader of Unit 731, not only approved of these attacks but also supported them. They believed that biological weapons, considered an effective method to win the war, would help them avoid genocide charges. After victory in China, Japanese officials then ordered Unit 731 to prepare to attack the Soviet Union. Trials were conducted in areas near Russian camps, spreading diseases such as anthrax and other disease outbreaks, showing the relentless cruelty of this program. The atrocities of Unit 731 spread far beyond Manchuria, even reaching mainland Japan, where experiments were conducted at the Army Medical College of Tokyo. This horrifying secret remained hidden until the 1980s, when construction workers discovered the remains of the victims who were the subjects of experiments in Pingfen, a facility that housed up to 400 prisoners, including men, women, and children. These prisoners, who were usually captured during military campaigns or crackdowns on local resistance groups, became the targets of unimaginable brutal experiments. When the number of prisoners was insufficient, Ishii would order his troops to capture civilians from Manchuria to meet the needs of the experiment. The soldiers, without hesitation, obeyed this heinous order. Those associated with the facility referred to the prisoners as Maruda, which means log wood, reflecting the total dehumanization experienced by the victims. In the eyes of these criminals, the prisoners were not humans, but merely materials for scientific experiments. No one survived from Pingfen. Ishii and his subordinates ensured that Ishii, known as a living symbol of the Japanese biological weapons program, was the architect and mastermind behind the atrocities of Unit 731. With horrifying delight, he destroyed human souls and bodies in pursuit of his terrifying military ambition. Unit 731, led by Shiro Ishii, was a cruel organization that conducted horrific experiments on humans on a large scale. Although Ishii and his team targeted almost all living creatures within their reach, they did not escape the damage they caused to their own Japanese military forces. In the summer of 1942, thousands of Japanese soldiers were affected by cholera and other diseases accidentally spread by Unit 731. Tragically, Ishii did not regret this incident, instead using the infected soldiers as further research material. More than 1,700 soldiers died as a result of this incident, but Ishii continued his research. Ishii was then transferred from Pingfen to Nanking, a remote area, and established a new facility in 1939 to mass-produce biological weapons for use in war. The disease outbreaks they created spread uncontrollably, killing hundreds of thousands of people every week, hindering the movement and progress of Allied and Japanese enemy forces. Ishii's atrocities made him respected by many of his colleagues, who considered him a genius and visionary who could lead Japanese science into the future. A doctor even stated that Ishii was like a god to us, and we thought that what he did was important for our country to win the war. Ishii's program, which spread throughout the Japanese Empire, likely employed more than 20,000 Japanese doctors, surgeons, nurses, and scientists from various disciplines. Although the Japanese medical and scientific community was aware of the experiments conducted by Unit 731 and similar units, the war did not go according to Japan's wishes. Germany, devastated by Allied forces on two fronts, Japan faced relentless resistance, not only from Chinese soldiers, but also from the United States, which was increasingly approaching Japanese territory. In early 1946, following Japan's defeat in World War II, Ishii's nightmare became a reality. Victory seemed impossible for this fanatical Japanese nationalist. Japan's surrender to the Allies following the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki and the Soviet invasion of Manchuria forced Ishii to return to Manchuria with his Unit 731. Their goal, to destroy all evidence of their heinous activities. Ishii, despite being a highly committed nationalist, did not want to face punishment for his war crimes. Unit 731, led by Ishii, burned down the Pingfen facility as soon as Soviet troops entered the area. They killed all the prisoners in their death camps, mostly Chinese workers, with cyanide injections. Near the city of Chengchen, Ishii's subordinates released gland-infected horses and thousands of plague-infected rats into local villages, spreading death and disease. More innocent people were killed in this final act of evil. Although the war officially ended on August 15, 1945, with Japan's unconditional surrender, the contagion spread by Ishii continued to plague China and Manchuria. Estimates of the number of victims of Ishii's biological weapons program vary, with many estimating a number far greater than 500,000 people. Of this number, about 20,000 people died in experimental stations and death camps throughout the Japanese Empire's territories in brutal human experiments. The exact number killed by Ishii himself is lost to history. Although Ishii was proven to have masterminded these horrific experiments, his figure is less known in history and was never tried. The tragic reason is that Ishii and Unit 731 received protection from the U.S. military towards the end of the war. The U.S. military devised a plan to protect Ishii and his subordinates in exchange for the data from their experiments. Operation Flamingo, a secret mission planned by the United States military, aimed to rescue American prisoners of war in Japanese-occupied territories and obtain data about the horrific experiments conducted on them. The American military was well aware that Japan had used biological weapons against its enemies, especially China, and suspected that these experiments were also applied to American prisoners of war. However, this operation plan was halted when Japan surrendered quickly on August 15, 1945, and Soviet forces arrived first to secure the areas where prisoners of war were held. It was later revealed that General Shiro Ishii, leader of Unit 731, had conducted horrific experiments on American prisoners of war, aiming to study their immunity to biological weapons. Tragically, the prisoners of war, both from America and other countries, became victims of these cruel experiments, and many died. The United States government had long known about these experiments, partly due to an incident involving a group of Japanese doctors trying to steal yellow fever virus samples from the Rockefeller Medical Research Institute in New York City. Although their efforts failed, this incident triggered an investigation by the Department of State. Although this information was kept secret from the public, rumors and reports about Japanese biological weapons began to spread. In 1942, the nationalist government of China published the Chen Report, a document detailing Japan's use of biological weapons. When American forces began to detain Japanese prisoners of war, they obtained information about the Japanese Empire's biological weapons program. American intelligence officers also identified Shiro Ishii as a key figure behind the program. The United States government, in an effort to gain access to scientific information, sent their researchers to interview scientists from Unit 731, a notorious Japanese military unit known for its brutality in conducting biological experiments during World War II. Dr. Roichi Nego, one of General Shiro Ishii's closest colleagues and the leader of Unit 731, quickly informed the American scientists that the officers of Unit 731 were willing to share their knowledge with the U.S., but on the condition that they be granted full immunity from war crimes prosecution. General Douglas MacArthur, who was assigned to lead the rebuilding of Japan, granted the request of the Unit 731 officers, allowing them to gain full immunity in exchange for information about their research. Ishii and his subordinates responded quickly and immediately flooded the American research team with information. Ishii came out of hiding in Tokyo in 1946 and was arrested by U.S. forces. The U.S. leadership in Japan soon received instructions from the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. to protect the information obtained from Japanese scientists related to biological weapons and to keep these experiments secret from the public. Later, due to the sharing of this information, American officials fostered a friendship with Ishii to strengthen his protection. Ishii promised additional information about his program as long as he received absolute immunity from prosecution by the U.S. government. Douglas pleaded with his superiors to grant immunity by emphasizing that Japan had information that could be used by the U.S. to enhance their power. His request was granted. It seems that although American officials were aware of the crimes committed by Ishii, they wanted information more than justice enforcement. Even when the Tokyo war crimes trials were taking place, U.S. prosecutors avoided mentioning the use of biological warfare to cover up the crimes of Ishii and his colleagues. While Nazi criminals and those who behaved cruelly during the war were prosecuted for their crimes, Ishii and his fellow scientists were absolved of responsibility. Shiro Ishii, the mastermind behind Japan's brutal biological warfare program, escaped punishment for his crimes by sharing his horrifying information with American scientists. He was offered freedom in exchange for information while his manufactured disease outbreaks ravaged the Pacific region, killing far more people than officially recorded during the war. In the following years, the American government continued to pressure Ishii to surrender all his biological warfare records. Ishii's daughter, Harumi, claimed that American researchers and military officials repeatedly threatened her father before his death to obtain additional information. Ishii seemed to strive to maintain secrecy by only surrendering about 80% of the data in an effort to protect himself and his colleagues from prosecution. In 1959, Ishii was diagnosed with laryngeal cancer, a disease he studied firsthand during his experiments. After a brief struggle with cancer, Shiro Ishii, the architect of Japan's biological warfare, died in a hospital in Tokyo on October 9, 1959. His role in World War II was rarely highlighted. Although the Soviet Union and China protested with accusations that America was covering up Ishii's crimes for their own benefit. However, few believed the reports from the communist countries at the time. Around the 1980s and 1990s, Japanese and Western media finally spotlighted Unit 731, and some former members began to open up about their experiences, revealing a scandal that shocked the Western world. Some of those involved in this unit remained unrepentant, claiming that their participation was merely part of the war effort, while others showed deep remorse. The role of Ishii in Unit 731 in the atrocities committed during World War II has become increasingly exposed over time despite efforts to cover up their actions. Testimonies from American prisoners of war held in Manchuria have shockingly witnessed firsthand the cruel experiments conducted by Japan, with eyewitnesses describing brutal operations performed on their comrades. The United States National Archives provided additional evidence of actions covered up by U.S. officials, further clarifying Ishii's role in these atrocities and triggering public outrage. In the early 2000s, further research revealed how disease outbreaks caused by Ishii in China had given birth to a new disease that had claimed the lives of thousands of innocent people. Despite public outrage and the scandal that unfolded, Ishii and his colleagues were never prosecuted, and their role in World War II became an unclear part of history. Their crimes were almost unrecorded, but their legacy and impact are felt on the edge of world history, especially in many territories of the Japanese Empire during World War II.